For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to The Gist on StratNewsGlobal. I'm Surya Gangadharan, and this evening we are looking at China's space program. My guest is Ajey Lele of the Institute of Defence Studies and Analyses. He is a specialist on space and has written extensively about it. He has researched on it and recently made a presentation at a think tank in Delhi on the enormous strides that China has made. I have a small graphic here that I'd like to show you which encapsulates what we're going to talk about. First of all, China has civilian and military elements in its space program, but each feed into the other in terms of technology and expertise. Heavy investments are going to be continued to be made by the current Chinese leadership in space despite tech sanctions from the US. Key goals for China's space program range from militarizing the moon to nuclear-powered rockets. If all goes well, China could surpass the US in space by 2045. Ajey Lele, I've gone through that presentation, not in great detail because it is so extensive and so well researched. But China has distinct civilian and military programs, or do they kind of work together in terms of technology sharing, expertise? How does it work?
You see, as far as China is concerned, China is pretty open about their investments into the space. They have come out with 4 to 5 white papers over last, particularly in the 21st century, explaining what they are doing in space, what is their space agenda and all that. So that is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that what China is telling us, what China wants others to know. If you really look at the entire conceptualization of a Chinese space program, there is a huge civilian element associated with it. But at the back of it, let's accept the reality that Chinese space program is under PLA. So all said and done, Chinese space program has a military element since beginning, and their entire space program is under the eyes of the PLA. So whatever advantages, whatever innovations which they do in a civilian sector, immediately that get juxtaposed into their military agenda.
Mm-hmm. In that sense, would you say it's more efficiently managed than perhaps India's largely civilian driven?
You see, as far as India's space program is concerned, we got a clarity since day one. And India has always said that our space program is for socio-economic development. If you really look at the military element of India's space program, that started very late, maybe as around, if my memory goes correct, in the year 2005, the then Defence Minister, Mr. Pranav Mukherjee, had said that India has got an interest into the military aspects of a space. But there is a subtle difference between Indian aspects, Indian view of a military and Chinese view of a military. China is looking at more of a space program which amounts to weaponization of a space, while India is using space program to assist the military, that is Army, Navy, Air Force. So you can say that Indian space program from a military dimension is a force multiplier for all the three services. We started with a satellite for Indian Navy in the year 2013 called Rukmini, and subsequently we have launched a satellite 2 years back for Indian Air Force. These are communication satellites. Otherwise, we have got a range of remote sensing satellites, which are actually dual-use satellites, which could be used both for civilian and military purposes.
So would you say the Chinese space program kind of mirrors the American thing, which also has a strong military element to it?
You see, as far as Chinese space program is concerned, if you slightly trace back the history, China could have picked up on few occasions what has happened in the international domain. In the year 1983, the then US President Ronald Reagan gave a speech on strategic defense initiative. That actually made a difference into thinking of various people. So China understood that US is going to develop their space program at the backdrop of strategic defense initiative a big way into the domain of a space, particularly from a military perspective. Then in the year 1992, there was a so-called accidental bombing of Chinese embassy in Belgrade, where 4 people died. So China clearly understood that space is an important element, and 1991 Gulf War actually showcased the space technologies to the rest of the world. So particularly from a perspective of there should not be any issue or US should not get asymmetric advantage in a Taiwan sector, China decided to invest more into a space from a military perspective.
So what would you say are the top technology that China may be working on at this point? Three or four of them.
As far as China is concerned, they are working on various technologies. China started their space program as a spacefaring nation way back in 1970. Subsequently, they initially concentrated on ensuring that they will get their rocket science correct. That means they can pick up heavy satellites also out into the space. So by the year 1984 or something, they started putting satellites into a geostationary orbit. So from a technology point of view, they started developing rocket engines with good amount of a success over here. As far as satellite systems are concerned, they started developing various sensor technologies which are required for remote sensing. Particularly, if I have to name a sensor technology called synthetic aperture radar, which allows you 24/7 visibility, all weather visibility also. So those technologies they picked up very early, and that has helped them both in a civilian domain as far as in a commercial domain and a military domain too. Now coming to the recent developments in a technology, the focus is on moon and Mars missions. So they are basically a human space program, again a very successful space program. So they have developed docking technologies, they have developed technologies for developing artificial arm out into the space. So all these technologies on the face of it are good technologies, but they can be easily tweaked for the military purposes.
And where is this largely homegrown? Was it acquired from the Russians?
Initially, it is said that Chinese space program was based on a Russian space program. They were interested and they invested into a lot of reverse engineering and all that. But subsequently, on its own, China has developed a space program. As far as China's relationship with rest of the world is concerned, there is some rule position in the US. Because of that, China and NASA can't collaborate with each other. But China has got a very healthy collaboration with various European countries. So there has been a technology collaboration, there has been an exchange of scientists. A lot of scientists who are working in the US, maybe scientists of a Chinese origin also, they all have joined hands together to develop a space program. So I will say it is job of many people whose heads were put together.
And they've been successful in tapping into the diaspora.
Definitely. They were very successful in tapping in the diaspora. You can see at open source documents also, a lot of Chinese scientists or people of a Chinese origin have done a lot of papers with the US agencies, US people. They have been working in various space organizations, not only in NASA, but various other space organizations, particularly with European Space Agency. They've got a very good connect. So they have picked up technology from here and there, but they have done a homegrown innovation also. One must give it to them.
And do you say, would they have any deadlines, say, over the next 3 years, this is what they'll do, next 2 years?
They follow a very specific deadline-oriented space program. If I have to just give you an example about their moon mission also, they started with Chang'e 1, now they have launched Chang'e 5 and Chang'e 6 also. So on the papers at least their deadlines, you see space is a domain where one always understands that it takes a significant amount of challenges also are there. China had one of the rocket failures, the bigger rocket for long march which they were developing. So they have overcome those things. So broadly I can say that they are able to stick to the deadlines, maybe a couple of years here and there. But for the entire moon program, Mars program, they have got dedicated deadlines which are put in place. So they're making that sort of a progress in a systematic fashion.
So when you talk of militarizing the moon, what can we expect?
You see, one must not get the idea of what we call militarizing on the surface of the earth. The similar type of idea will be there into the surface of the moon. As far as moon is concerned, right now there is good amount of interest with many people in the world. That's why even Asian countries like Japan, India, Israel, everybody is trying to look at the moon. If I go back to the history, the first moon mission which happened, the human mission, was out of sheer demonstration of a technical capacities. Because you had USSR putting a human into the space, you had what we call Gangadharan movement, and the US was definitely was wanted to give a response and showcase to rest of the world that yes, we are greater in technologies. That's why you can see few astronauts going there, generally jumping around and getting back. There was no scientific agenda. But now there is a scientific agenda for the moon, and that is particularly to grab the resources over the moon. Right now there is a theoretical prediction that the helium-3 which is available only on the surface of the moon, if you can get that back, it will boost up your energy security hugely. And that's the basic idea of reaching to the moon right now. And in years to come, when China is going to militarize the space, because this idea came out with a head of NASA a couple of months back, where he has expressed his opinion that China is looking at a moon from a different perspective. So basically, it could be an idea of grabbing the resources or taking control of the resources over the moon.
Do you see them staking claims to territory on the moon?
You see, it's too early to say. You got a moon treaty, but China is not signatory to that treaty. So you never know what will happen in future. But China is developing their technologies in such a fashion that they will be able to do something bigger on the moon surface.
You refer to rockets. Are nuclear-powered rockets feasible?
Nuclear power rockets have been talked about for quite some time now. Way back in 50s and 60s, the US had a Orion program, which was again a nuclear powered rocket propulsion program. Subsequently, Russians have worked on it. It has not become a reality because there are a lot of technical challenges. Simplistically, if I have to put that, when you do in a commercial basis, the enrichment of uranium is required to be done 5 times. But when you're talking of a nuclear power rocket, you need to enrich it 19.75%. So huge amount of efforts are required over there. But the quest for a nuclear power rockets is for basically 2 reasons. You can carry more weight out into the space, and you can reach particularly to deep space, that is missions to Moon and Mars, in a very short period of time. Because if you recollect, when India had launched its mission to Mars, it took 9 months to reach to the Martian surface. So the timeline has to be reduced, and that's only possible if you have got, because our present technology where we are having rockets, it are based on the chemical propulsion. So you need to change that. So there are a lot amount of efforts which are on globally. In fact, China has come out and officially that project also has been sanctioned of an idea of developing the way we have got nuclear industry on the Earth's surface. They want to create a nuclear power industry on the surface of the moon or in the vicinity of a moon. So they have got a concept of a space nuclear station.
Space nuclear station.
Where they want to, because you see in future they feel that there will be more space stations. If I slightly go back to Chinese recent thinking about the space station, they already established their own space station. It's a smaller station as compared to International Space Station, but they have articulated a vision of having a space station which could be 1 kilometer wide. So to have such type of a space station and sustain that into a space, you'll require huge amount of a power, and it will be stupid to get a power from surface of the Earth to the moon. So they want to establish some sort of a mechanism over there, and that only is possible if you generate a nuclear power space station. So these are the ideas. These are too early days. It may take a couple of decades for these ideas to mature. But the way their space program has evolved over a period of time, I think one has to look at it seriously.
So when we look at Asia, and I noticed in that in your presentation you have said there is no space race in Asia. So the Chinese are so well ahead now. I mean, where do we stand?
There are 2 ways of looking at it. One is that space race or arms race is basically a Cold War era construct. So let's not unnecessarily push it in this domain also. If you look at Chinese space program, if I have to just do a very simple comparison, in the year 2003, the first Chinese went into the space. India is yet to reach to that level. Recently, we did a very successful LMV launch, where we picked up 5.7 tons out into the space. When China has done it recently, they have picked up 25 tons out into the space. So this space program is way ahead. That is number 1. Number 2 is that I think one should not do unnecessarily comparisons, because India's space program is based on India's requirements. Chinese space program is based on their requirements. Other players in the Asian domain are Japan, Israel and all that. They have got space programs which are good space programs, but it has got certain amount of limitations. So just to compare apples and oranges and say that there is a space race may not be a correct idea.
But technology wise, are we following the similar path that the Chinese have done in terms of trying to develop things on our own?
We are following a similar path in a sense that we have concentrated on few areas. Recently, India has started concentrating into developing a rocket launch vehicle for launching small satellites also. Now we are giving a boost to economy. We are thinking of developing a space economy also. The way we have started developing a defense economy or defense industrial architecture, we want to develop a space industrial architecture also. So a lot of new startups have started coming up. They have started making investments on their own. But if you really look at it, we need to have a good amount of a hand-holding from ISRO, because SpaceX, a very major agency of Elon Musk, is a great success, but there has been a good amount of a hand-holding by NASA. Because space is such a critical business that you require test facilities, various other facilities, which now ISRO has committed to offer to our private industry also. So I think we are there, but these are too early days. If I have to just give you comparison based on the percentage of a space market which we have picked up, we have got hardly 2% of a space market. So we need to really push it further.
And comparatively, China would have?
You see, China has got a limitation, particularly I can say. There is a trust deficit as far as China is concerned. But as far as India is concerned, there is huge amount of international trust on India's systems, transparency of India's space program and all that. So I think these are the strong areas of India where India should encash on.
Say over the next decade or 20 years, do you think China will overtake the US, dominate space?
I think there has been more talk about it. There are many scientists who are also saying about it. But if I have to do some sort of a basic comparisons, today we got around 5,000 satellites out into the space which are operational, out of which 3,000 satellites belongs to the US, and China has got 500 satellites. You look at the investments also. NASA's investments are 10 times more than Chinese investments. So what China, to my mind, is doing is they are trying to get an asymmetric advantage. They are not trying to copy US system by system. NASA has got huge investments into various programs. So China has only picked up few programs which has got good amount of optics also and which will give them benefits also. So China is doing it in such a fashion that entire world will feel that there is an advantage. But NASA has got a very major space program where they are working for many years. So China may catch up with the US in particularly few sectors. They have got an interest in launching a human mission to the moon before the US and all that. So they understand where they got strengths and they're only working towards it.
So last question, India is collaborating with NASA and with Europe also. Do you see anything similar with the Chinese?
You see, India is not trying to copy China per se. Number two is that India has got its own space agenda clear. All said and done, almost 95 to 97 of India's space program is for socio-economic development. And to my mind, that's a very correct step also to take. Because space is too important technology to be militarized unnecessarily. And India understands that pretty good. Only thing is that India need to slightly invest more towards the military aspects of a technology also, because you see, modern day armed warfare, particularly the modern day military equipment, come with a baggage that you need to have access to the space. Otherwise you just can't use 4th generation, 5th generation aircrafts and all that. So India need to slightly boost up that military side of a space program too.
And you would say our technology base is improving?
Our technology base is improving. We have taken time because we were under sanctions. But sanctions indirectly has helped India because the more amount of research and development has happened internally and a lot amount of innovations are happening. And right now one can see a lot amount of startups who are doing very interesting projects in India. I think the future of India's space program is not going to remain limited to ISRO. All these startups will play a very important role, not only from a point of view of launching missions, but from point of view of developing indigenous technology also.
Fascinating. Ajey Lele, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And those of you who joined us on this conversation, thank you for tuning in. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media and Instagram. Thank you.